He's being wired up.
Okay, thank you. Hello! It works! Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, Uncle Micah, and see everybody and this wonderful program that you have, and I understand that you mostly have people who are members of the congregation. I'm part of that, but wonderful to be part of that. My friend Judith Burris is here, and she's got some new poems coming up, if you don't know that. April 16th at Politics and Prose. You know the decades, so she's on to the next decade with a poet. So you got to be there. That's it, I'm done. Well, you know, I know a lot about poverty. I've worked on it for a long time, and I thought I knew a lot. But you know, I did not know about this book that I've written now, which is Not a Crime to Be Poor. I didn't know about the crisis of fines and fees and money bail. We now know a lot about it for a lot of reasons. And I think what opened my eyes and probably many of you, it was only 5 years ago, the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. What we found there, really the Department of Justice, you remember that, and under Obama, of course, we found and learned that here was this city in Ferguson that was abusing its own citizens with unbelievable, exorbitant fines and fees for so-called quality of life crime, and sending them to jail when they couldn't pay. Not a really smart way to get money, because you have to put them in the jail, but anyway, they seem to get a profit out of it. The result from that, I think we woke up as a country because of that report. And what we found was a nation with just an epidemic of enormous fines and fees, driver's license suspensions by the millions, and just gross abuse of money bail. So just to put it in a framework, and I'll talk about it more, but it really began, the mass incarceration goes back really into the 70s, and this is connected, but this is based in the anti-tax rebellion of the Reagan, starting in the Reagan time. Really abetted by mass incarceration, they all fit together. And what has happened here, quote unquote, it's the age of user fees. This is a form, a really awful form, not so great for anybody, but, it became omnipresent in court systems, making the poor poorer and often enmeshed for the rest of their lives. And when you think about what courts in our country are supposed to be, and we certainly know that we don't have, on the civil side, we don't have enough lawyers, and we have, for example, here in Washington, 95% of people who were brought to a landlord and tenant court here in Washington, D.C., come without a lawyer. Here, that's something I've been working on for some time, and many of you probably as well. But this is all kind of connected. It's what we do about people who don't have much money doesn't go very well for them, to say the least, in court. So I wrote a book about the first part of what I told you. So take just one example, a man named Edwards, who lives in Pelham, Georgia. And he has a significant intellectual disability, and he can't read and write. He was fined $500 for burning leaves without a permit, and another $528 for so-called probation run by a for-profit company. And so when Mr. Edwards couldn't come up with the instant payment that they required to come up with $250, which he did not have, he was sent to jail. And like so many people who get into these being arrested and brought in around the country, low income, African American, other parts of the country, Latino, but not like most of the people. Mr. Edwards was liberated because a lawyer, Sarah Garrity of the Southern Center for Human Rights, which is not far away, and works on these issues, heard about it and got him out. And in fact, she got that whole county to change their policies and behave. But you just can't keep up on it. We don't have enough lawyers, and nonetheless, if Sarah hadn't found him, you and I would not know about him. And those without a lawyer, which is usual, would still be stuck. Another example, not with a name, but you go into municipal courtrooms any morning in New Orleans and in St. Louis and Cleveland, lots of places, you see the same thing. You see men and occasionally women who are all nearly African American men in orange jumpsuits, or Latinos in other parts of the country. Now, there are some people who were there for real crimes and so on, but the vast number are people who've been hauled in for one thing or another, like the story of Ada Edwards, and lots of them, I'll say another word about it, are people who had their driver's licenses suspended and hadn't paid and found themselves in jail because of that. So what's it all about? Well, pure and simple, it's the criminalization of poverty. A systemic way for states and communities to raise billions of dollars. That's what it is, including from the poor. Around here, you may know about or know Grover Norquist. And he said, as you may remember, reduce the government to the size where I can drown it into the bathtub. That's what this is about. So, starved for revenues, and states and local governments turned to shaking people down. And so it's 21st debtors' prisons, and then some. So how does it work? Well, like Ada Edwards, you get convicted for minor infractions, you get sentenced for an outsized fine and a fee fees that have nothing to do with the offense, and the person can't pay. Some people get put in jail for that unconstitutionally because they can't pay, but typically the court sets up a payment plan. And that's going to be on the order of $50 a month, $40 a month, and these are poor people. And there's lots of other fees too. So they put you on this so-called probation, and you have to pay. Bogus, there's no social service associated to it. 13 states have their probation agency or for profit. So you might say, well, that's, there's 37 others. Actually, there's 44 states that charge now. I mean, those of us who are a little older, we remember when probation was something you did because it was something that meant something and it was free. Taxpayers paid for it. 44 agencies, probation agencies in this country, that means 31 of them public probation agencies, charge money. And they even had it in San Francisco, somebody found out a year or so ago. And of course they got rid and so on and so on, and they got rid of it. San Francisco, I mean, it was the thing to do. So you have for-profit all over the place, not just with prisons, not just with jails, not with probation. You have diversion, electronic ankle bracelets, fees all over the place. 28 different kinds of fees in Oklahoma, 20 different kinds of fees in Florida, and they're all for these little things. Most of them shouldn't be on the books at all. You pay for the courthouse library. That's one that I dug up. You pay for everything. And it can run into thousands of dollars and go on forever. And the interest mounts up. Criminal contempt for not paying on time. That turns into new debt because it's a new crime. Goes on and on. And there's never an inquiry about ability to pay, which is unconstitutional. So, another version. The money bail. The person is arrested on a minor misdemeanor, and this you read more now in the paper, fortunately. You're put in jail for this minor misdemeanor. Typically, you have to pay bail for that if you want to get out. $500 typically, could be more. Because you're waiting for trial and you can't get out. So what they do is they plead guilty. And when they're not, and so that leads to the payment plan, etc., what I've already been through. But the bail is very, very key. And this misuse is just one part of the terrible system that's money bail. 700,000 people in jail every day for one reason or another. That's all over the country, 700,000. And 450,000 of those people are not guilty of anything. Not guilty of anything. Because they're sitting there, they can't get out because they've been told they have to pay that $500 and they haven't got it. 450,000. And the number who should be held, there's some, but it's tiny compared to that. Now the biggest money comes from, as I mentioned in passing, driver's license suspensions. This is really the preferred way that the states do, and the courts do, is to take away the driver's license. Why? 44 states do it. 7 million people have lost their licenses around the country. It works. People have to get to work. They have to take the kids to school. Another arrest. Another crime. It's, then you owe more money. That's how it works. None of it's for driving dangerously. These are not people who, there may be a tiny number who drank and drove, but this is mainly about collecting court debt. So what they want is for people to mount and add up and add up and add up, and it has nothing to do with driving at all. The numbers. 4 million people lost their driver license in California. It's getting a little better now because they sort of woke up as the school, also the state got a little bluer. So they're working on it. $4 million and 1.8 million in Texas and 1.2 million in North Carolina, almost 1 million in Virginia. It works beautifully, big money. Then there's a man named George Ritchie, who I learned about, I worked on a brief that somebody had, and he's in Missouri, another example, different from what I've said so far. He is unable to get free because he can't pay for his room and board at the county jail. Pay to stay, it's no, in the game. So his income is from SSI, disability. He gets $600 a month. Originally, he was jailed for not paying $116.50 fine, which he couldn't pay. So they put him in jail. And after 90 days, he owed $3,165, and in another, since he couldn't pay that, there was another 90 months, and he owed another $2,275. This is going on right now. And he was going to be on this for the rest of his. There's no reason why they wouldn't stop. And again, it's wacko because they have to pay, except they figure that they're going to get it out of him, but they're never going to get it out of him. They're just going to keep him jailed. Well, now, like Adel Edwards, who I talked about before, now he has a lawyer. And so now we know that the practice of pay to stay is widely used through the rural counties in the state. We're talking about Missouri, remember. And in the state and the higher up judges and judges in the big city, they all think it's terrible, and they didn't have the capacity to stop it. So anyway, Matt Mueller, a Missouri State public defender, has the case right now in the state appellate courts to see if they can knock it out. Very sad, and it's not unique with Missouri. This happens in many states. Juvenile fees have become typical too. And I was the commissioner in New York State in the 70s for young people who had been taken into for something they had done. And you try to be helpful and so on, get them on, so on and so on. The idea of paying for that, paying for probation, this is all juvenile, just like the adults, supervision, paying, diversion, paying, drug testing, pay to stay there, more. And the way it works, of course, is that the families are hit with it. Because the young person doesn't have the capacity, but the debts go on into adulthood. And so what happens is it ruins credit for the children as they grow up to adulthood. And collateral consequences, of course, which is a huge problem for all the way across adult as well. These young people are going to grow up into a world where they'll have trouble getting jobs, where they won't be able to live in public housing and more. So why? Money. So the whole thing is really, truly modern peonage. It's really a government-operated loan shark system. And it's also big business. 2 out of 3 of every current and former inmate owe unpaid fees, fines and fees, including charging for room and board, as I said. It adds up to 10 million people owing $50 billion in court debt. Not small. So mass incarceration came first, the younger sibling just as evil. Community policing turned into community fleecing. It calls up memories of the sharecropping economy that holds families in financial servitude, and all was ending the year owing more than they had earned from the crop and be shackled for another season. It was vicious and unforgiving cycle, and it still is. What's different is that, particularly since Ferguson, I mean, they were working on these things before, lawyers, and you may remember New York Times or New Yorker, so on and so on, but there wasn't a sense of understanding about it everywhere. Well, now there's litigation like Mueller that I was just telling you about in Missouri, or Sarah Garrity. And there's legislative advocates. As we're talking today, in New York State, with the change in the legislature, there's a serious money bail reform legislation right now as we talk. And there's been major change with one way or another, either by suing or by legislation. So we're seeing, especially on the money bail, but there's also movement on the license suspensions and fines and fees as well. And you keep finding them, like George in Missouri, keep finding these things. There was the ACLU found next Lexington, Kentucky in South Carolina. Horrible thing of essentially creating people into guilty, I won't go into the details, making people crimes when they literally didn't even know they had been arrested for anything. And the ACLU is having some success about pushing back. But what we need now is much more public awareness and participation. Nearly every state has issues, and people are finding that out. I feel nice about this. I mentioned in this book that Montana took away driver's licenses for young people who didn't pay their loans. This is the state money.
Wow.
For going to college. Well, I got a call from the ACLU, they read my book, and they now have 3 bills that they're putting in because they have state ACLUs of lots of money now. And so they're got efforts to change that legislation and similar in Montana, in Arkansas, and Florida. So things are happening. But we just need civic pressure. That's what we really need. This can change it, and it's helping to change it in mass incarceration, but people they're getting there on bail, but these other things not so much, and it affects millions of people, and they deserve better. Now, there's more criminalization of poverty. In some ways, these are things that are just as serious and awful. It's really the criminalization of poverty is metastasized. So children act up in a classroom, and they end up in a courtroom. Judges rule on minor incidents that principals used to handle in the principal's office. And you find this everywhere. And the spurt in sending kids to court rather than the principal's office started after the shooting, terrible shooting, of course, in Columbine in 1997, I think it was. And the federal government spent $750 million to add 6,500 school resource offices, SROs, in 3,000 schools. Now that's for safety, and I hope it's had some effect on us, but it turns out that a lot of it is picking up these kids and hauling them in and arresting them, and of course, remember I said collateral consequences. It's going to be with them for probably their whole lives. A couple of years ago, the thing I'm telling you was a little bit, not yet yesterday, but anyway, it's in the last couple of years, 260,000 students, 260,000 students arrested in school and referred to law enforcement. That's a national number. It's a lot of people. And in the people who are, I don't know what to call them, I'll just say, in Texas and Wyoming, they send them to adult court. Yeah. Then, when people call 911 to seek protection against domestic violence, in a lot of places around the country, the police can evict them when they have called too often for 911. So we only know it, again, because the lawyers are involved, especially the ACLU. And so this example is a community in Pennsylvania, and Letitia Briggs, who's a certified nurse, and in Norristown, Pennsylvania. She didn't call 911 because her former boyfriend had gotten out of jail. She didn't call because of being worried of being evicted, and she was there was an attack that almost killed her. Well, Sandra Park, the ACLU, was brought in by the local legal aid people. And in this case, the result was $500,000 at a high price. $500,000 settlement with the city, which also repealed its ordinance, and the state also appealed his law, which makes us about, I think it's 4, maybe 5 states now have bans on that in the whole country, only about 5. The newest one, these are things that you find out essentially, there's so much more going on, but Maplewood, Missouri is a place where it's been gone to court, but where if a woman tenant calls the police too often, they can ban her from living in the town at all for 6 months. And ACLU and John Relman, some of you may know here in Washington, had the case and beat them, and there's a settlement, and so. But the idea of how did they even think that up? And it's going on. I mean, because there are in Sandra Park, who I mentioned, she's done studies in upstate New York. Anyway, there's more than this than you think. And you have fraud charges against public benefit applications, and recipients are treated in a criminal way. You have police who vigorously prosecute vagrancy laws against the homeless, public housing rules that bar ex-offenders. It just goes on. What's happened to mental health in our country? I mean, all over the country, jails and prisons, typically 40% of the people in those institutions have serious mental health problems. So the idea of the criminalization of poverty is not just the fines and fees. And of course, what's happening on all of these things, everything I've said, is as much about race as it is about poverty. And the intersection of race and poverty, I always say, is the most dangerous place in town. So we have I've told you things that people are if you go maybe has a question, I can tell you more, but there's a lot more in the details of the fighting back. And there are people who are doing it on a bigger scale to fight back. So Prop 47 in California, what happened in Florida for ex-offenders to be able to vote in Florida, that's because of an organization where the head of it is a wonderful organizer named Lenore Anderson. We need to be doing those kinds of things to get the people involved, not the experts, to get involved in everything. And we really have to commit to create a movement on this. And of course, it's not surprising, we would all agree, that we need political change. For a lot of reasons. But it relates to this too, and of course this is heavily about the state and local, although we do have the First Step Act about the federal prisons recently. But fundamentally, it's on us to make these changes, to do them wholesale. We seem to be moving a little bit in the right direction. Anyway, the real solution to injustice, I always look to Brian Stevenson, you all know him, and he says many things that are very wise, and he says the opposite of poverty is justice. That's one. Secondly, and finally, once we hear that we know about these injustices, we are compelled to act in one way or another, whatever way that we can do. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, and we all know that he said things that would, if we began reading, we'd be reading for weeks and months and years. But there is one tweet before there was Twitter, and he said, we're not all guilty, but we are all responsible. Thank you.
I think Peter is going to respond to questions, and just before we get to that, a few reminders. Please find your cell phone and make sure it's on. When you get the microphone, hold it close to your chin. It works better that way. And would you give your name so Peter's acquainted with you?
There was somebody right next to you that said...
Raise your hand, please. Nope.
Okay, and then in the back.
I'm Milton Joyce, Peter.
Are you? You look like it.
I think you made an allusion at the very beginning of your talk, and I don't think you went back to it, that this may also be the indirect result of this beautiful liberalization of the tax system on the federal level, at least. That in lieu of taxes, we are now extorting this money from poor people. Many of us in this very room cheer the fact that we pay less taxes, but we don't understand the consequence, the inevitable consequence of the public institutions raising less money. Would you give us a word on that?
Well, yes. I think it speaks for itself, Milton, when we're talking about the anti-tax rebellion, which has been with us now for decades. We all know that. Certainly, a major part of that was to make the rich richer, no question. And just in general, to squeeze and not get the money that's necessary to run governance at all levels. So it's partly to make the rich richer, but it's really, it created a politics that goes across the board. Because they're constantly, the middle class people have to pay their share too, if we're going to run a government. And so there is this, and if you had people understanding what was really necessary, it would have a tax system that was everybody putting in a fair share, but especially the people at the top, for sure. In the back, there are two back there, and then come in.
Ed Wendell, I have a two-part question. One, Is there a common theme, the legal theories that are used to attack this, the state constitution, is there something that runs through most of the attacks? And the second question is, I've heard part of this before, but after listening to you, I never realized how endemic and systemic, whatever all those words are, throughout the entire system. So how does one go about overturning it when all these fights you talk about, they're all one at a time in one place at a time, and it just seems like hopeless and overwhelming. So, I mean, I guess your thing is organize and go out and get people excited and go do it. So
Yeah.
those are my two.
Well, that's the answer. On the first, if I understand the question, the legal, constitutional theories are equal protection and due process. And when you look at these doing it by litigation, that's what they're using. So, but going on to the second, which is certainly true, it's a big country, so I can keep you here all day about the wins, and but it's tough, and doing it unless you do something in the Supreme Court. So that's not necessarily the golden answer. So it's helpful, but the bigger thing is to change these things in mostly state legislatures. And at least that's a smaller number. And so one of the things that is true is that this is an area where there's a degree of conservatives who also agree with this. If nothing else, because it's a waste of money. And so some of the people just are for these changes for that reason. The Koch brothers, for example, who, I don't think we have much to say for the court, but they happen to be good on this issue. And there's a guy named Mark Levin who's a very well known on the conservative side, who's a big advocate for change. So it's just that even in the, I've been working on this book and then talking about this for 4 years, the amount of activity is really, it's, I won't say stunning, but it's surprising, it's good. And one of the things that you find is that in places you wouldn't expect, red states, there are people making changes. So the Chief Justice in South Carolina made a requirement that all the judges who got any of these relevant problems to ask to see whether people have the ability to pay. And that's happened in a number of states, mostly, well, but especially when we see it in the South, that's good. You have pushing it by outside, by advocates, but Mississippi, for example, there was the Southern Poverty Law Center pushed this. Mississippi gave back 100,000 driver's licenses. There is, on the court side, and this is the first big, and it shows you how new all this, the first big win on driver's licenses in Tennessee, where there was a 104, the judge wanted to really make the point, wrote a 146-page decision, and went up to the Sixth Circuit, and they affirmed it. And the people of Tennessee are on the route to getting 250,000 driver's licenses back. So it's coming. And I told you about those 3 places in of the ACLU to work on driver's licenses by legislation, and that's just for getting started. So it's absolutely right that it's, but there's a lot happening. Okay, over there was there was one back there. Well, she's there. Yeah, I'm sorry. then we'll go over there, and then we'll get around here.
Shelley Grossman. What is the situation in DC?
It's actually, we thought, it's a little bit like what I told you about San Francisco, how they were making people pay, and we had a problem here of taking away driver's licenses. And some of you may know about SEDEC, is the name of a organization. They allowed themselves, they were, it's a big place of that name is in Los Angeles. And so they were allowed to use it. I mean, I think it's probably not patent, copyright. So the city council has passed a new statute that's gotten rid of about half of it. And we should probably get it to you because as this develops, it'd be great to have people to be supporting it. There'll be another round that is going to be done on that. So that's the piece that we found ourselves doing that we didn't know doing. That we had some tens of thousands of people, maybe about 100,000 people who had their driver's license taken away with no due process. They didn't even know it had been done, and sort of woke up one day and they didn't have a driver's license anymore. So, the wonderful of us.
Are there big corporations that are making money
Sure.
off of this? Can
Sure.
you give us the names of some so
Oh.
that we can boycott them?
Well, it's more, I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. The big one is CCA, I always want to say Container Something of America, but you know what I'm talking about. They're just, I mean, you can say, if you say CCE, it's that's the big one nationally, but there's a whole bunch of them. And there was and I'm sorry, I'm not good with my names right now, but the almost had a for-profit health organization to come into DC just within the last 2 years. And they had put in a lot of money, and we have a wonderful system that's been going on for years, it's had the contract for years, and they do a great job. And just be money, it was got to be that close, and there was a pushback and beat them off, which is exactly what we need to do. But if you look for-profit things that relate to the criminal system, you find them all. That's a great idea to work on it. Right, there's two right on your table there.
Hi. Let's see, I wonder if it's really appropriate to dismiss the Supreme Court. After all, they just decided against civil and criminal
Yes.
forfeiture. So my question is, are there any litigations going on with the goal of having a common theory that could find its
Yes,
way
well, there's
to
a
the
lot,
Supreme
and
Court?
I certainly didn't mean we're not doing it or they're doing it. There are, well over a dozen money bail litigation. One is California, where they did it under the state constitution, but the others are all in. And when Houston, Texas, Harris County is the most impressive decision, where the judge, Lee, I want to say Lee Rappaport, but I might not be right. Rosenthal, Lee Rosenthal. She wrote a 193-page opinion, and it went up to the Fifth Circuit, and they held up what she had done because it was just undeniable. What had done there was so horrible. They were doing their interviews by Skype. They weren't bringing them to court. And she says in her opinion that the interviews were 2 to 3 minutes for each person. That's in her opinion. And out of 51,000 people who went through for a decision to be made for them to money, only 4 people under the 51,000 had numbers below $500. Well, I think it's quite arguable that in the particular case of the Houston, do you know about what happened in Houston? There were 17 African-American women judges who were elected just this last November. And when they came in, they settled the case. So it's not going to go up to the Supreme Court. But if it was going to, I think you'd have a good shot. And when you talk about Tim's, the case you're talking about, TIMBS, I think. So this is about the Eighth Amendment, and it's about the Eighth Amendment says excessive fines. There's also excessive bail in it. And the court decided 9-0 that it wasn't just as one of the last things that was only on the federal side, and now it will go on the 14th Amendment. And so the question is, what will it mean beyond the seizures of the forfeitures? Because this story that I'm telling you today certainly sounds like excessive fines to me. And Justice Ginsburg does have who wrote the opinion, has a reference to an ACLU brief. So maybe we'll see something there. It's too early to say. Yeah, I think you're right to call me on that, because some of these things are so outrageous that if it comes up, there are Supreme Court cases that there's one called Beard versus Georgia, Bearden versus Georgia, which it was in the 80s about not holding somebody who's unable to pay. And if you get into the detail, and this is equal protection stuff, there's possibilities to broaden those things. So it's definitely part of a strategy. Yeah. There was one more there, and then we come over here.
Nancy Raskin. So my question is, so you're at Georgetown Law Center.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of law schools all over the country. Are they working on these kinds of things in their, local
Yes,
areas? Because
yeah.
it seems to me this is like a natural
Absolutely.
force to work on these things. And one other thing is in conjunction with it, we don't hear a lot about it in the newspapers. We don't hear, maybe I'm the only one who doesn't know about it.
It being the whole thing.
Like trying to get the word out.
Yeah.
Of using social media and trying to get this out.
On the first, it's increasing law schools, and I've got a proposal that I'm developed with the American Constitution Society, and we're going, as soon as we find some money, we're going to make a national network on law schools, and we're absolutely sure that there'll be beyond what's already been growing on that. On the other part, if you're right. I mean, there's more there than there was 5 years ago, and particularly on money bail. But the fines and fees story, not so much. The license, driver's license, it's more state by state, but there is coverage. There's some in New York Times kinds of things. But it's a little bit like if you had a problem with your back, find out all the people here who have a problem with your back, right? You find out about it. So if we could just get people to sort of put it in front of them, they'll say, oh yeah, I know somebody. I mean, now it's the victims, they sure know about it. But you put your finger right on it. Got 1 and 2 here. I hope I'm not missing.
Hi, I'm Diana Seasonwine, and Nancy, piggybacking on what you said, I'm a clinical social worker, and there's a discipline within social work called community organization, and it might be useful to talk to the social work schools and have that as a...
Well, certainly pass that on. There is around the country, I've talked to people, and there's a wonderful organization in Hartford that's called Democratic, I don't know if I can say it, anyway, it's about organizing, essentially organizing for democracy. And the point was to have me come up there, and they were starting a campaign in Connecticut. I was in St. Paul 2 weeks ago, same thing. I was in Milwaukee a year or so ago. So people are beginning to get at it, but we just need to ramp it up. Right here. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
I was looking at her because she was talking about.
Okay, it was a thought, not a
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
Hi, I want to make 3 points. One,
I can't do that. I'll write it down.
all right, no, you remember. The first one is the attorneys general. Now, I happen to know, because I heard it from one of them,
Say that again.
the attorneys general,
Yeah, yeah.
state attorneys general.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I know, because I heard it directly from one of them,
Okay.
that the Democratic AGs have weekly conference calls on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Now, some of them are not from the most progressive states,
Mhm.
but some of them are. And I wonder how they could play a role in moving along some of the things you've talked about. The second point or question is the Catholic Church, which has been in some trouble, but they
Yeah.
also do some very good things
Yeah.
at the local level. Have you been talking to the Conference of Catholic Bishops and people in that world? Certainly at the grassroots level, they're active. And my third point, which goes off in another direction, which you may not want to talk about, but so many years later, have you and former President Clinton ever discussed that issue which made you leave the government? Has he ever said he feels he went very wrong there? And I wonder if these years later, you have any further thoughts you'd like to share?
How much time do you have? Well, thank you on the first two. No, we'll talk about it. It's one of my favorite subjects. But the AG is a great idea, and some of them are on it. Our AG in Carl is very supportive on that, and California very interested in these issues. So I think there'll be more there, and I can, it's not me, it's other people that I would need to, and I think that all faith, not just the Catholics, I don't know why you say the Catholics, what about the Jews?
Well, they haven't been particularly active.
Right, but that's good, both good, very, very important. So the answer as far as Clinton and me, on that subject, or much of anything else, is no. That was really disappointing to me. I was very much involved in her campaign. One of my reasons for it, and I was co-chair of the committee that works on poverty and what have you like that, because I thought I would, she did change, you remember, on the 1994 crime law, which was so horrible. And she publicly said, she had some words that, whatever she said, but it was changing a position. She didn't do that on welfare. And I pushed that. What did happen is she had two opportunities. One was something that Bernie said in North Carolina, and she had to respond to it. And the other was the Los Angeles Times editorial page. And her answer was, it was good law, and it got messed up by the governors. Now, what that means is we gave them a block grant, which is a hideous thing to do. So they said, she said, therefore they had the opportunity, I mean, how many red states are there? We gave the governors a chance to do good public policy, and they did. It's their fault. So I think that was succinct and made the point.
I have an addendum. I would be happy to work with you as a liaison to the local schools of social work.
All right, well, we can talk. It's not me, but we can talk about it and where we could do it. And I'll tell you who it is that, and I'll get it from my friend Ariel Waldman, who's the TEDx guy. That's a perfect connection. So we'll do that. I'll give you my, yes?
I have one comment that I've thought of.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Just talk.
Okay, but press the
Yeah,
button.
no, it keeps talking.
I'm Elizabeth Eby, and I have one comment and one question.
Mhm,
My comment is that I grew up in a very conservative suburb of Chicago,
mhm.
and when I graduated from high school, every member of my graduating class received a gift of a Barry Goldwater's biography. My husband
Especially
grew
you said a
up.
gold watch, but anyway.
Well, my husband, who graduated from college, high school at the same time, lived in Orange County,
Mhm.
California. And they were removing Robin Hood from the school library at the same time that we were getting
Yeah.
Barry Goldwater.
Uh-huh.
So I think we need Robin Hood again. Anyway, my question is this. I'm confused about the driver's licenses.
Yeah.
Are you saying that people do something, they go to the police office, the police say, you have to give me this, and you don't have any money, so I take your driver's license?
No.
Or are they arrested for having no inspection?
Expired.
No. Well, it's anything that they get a ticket for, but it isn't only about cars. So whatever it is, not paying parking tickets, that's certainly one of the things. But it's about court debt. It's anything that people owe the city or the county, or whoever it is, and they don't pay within a certain period of time, and typically, there's no due process about it. They just take away the driver's license. That's how it works. And most of it has nothing to do with cars at all. It certainly has nothing to do with any dangerous use of the car.
So it's in lieu of cash?
Yeah, people don't have
Okay,
cash.
no, I got it. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that I understood what you're.
Right, no, it's about not paying. You bet. Okay, we can keep going if other people want to keep going.
Which one?
The first and then the second.
It's a little bit far afield, but
You have to wait, not allowed until,
you can't hear me?
David, we're building suspense.
Yeah. Pause is longer than the question. What do you think about reparations?
I think that we have an enormous job in this country to end discrimination. And we have people for a variety of reasons, people are poor and they shouldn't be. I don't personally find it the best way to pursue this by looking backward. My position on what we need to do with particular being explicit about race in our country. So the question is what the best way in terms of politics. You know, the idea of reparations, when you have somebody in a family, like Georgetown responded when they discovered that there were people who had slave owners who had actually worked for Georgetown. And there are living people who come down from those people. That's reparation. I'm totally in favor of that. To say as a totality of reparation, I'd rather do exactly the same thing in terms of public policy, but do it as a way that goes forward. I think that's more constructive. There was in the back, that's fine.
Okay, one moment though. We have had a request for you to display your book and read the title.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a great note to end. Peter Edelman, Not a Crime to Be Poor, The Criminalization of Poverty in America. And there are various places where you can buy it, I'm told.
Hi, my name's Ed Grossman, and my question goes back to the money issue, which is that a lot of this seems to be focused upon rural and less wealthy communities which have basically imposed this as a type of user fee on the poor, particularly for this. In the absence of their ability to collect money, because that's going to be the necessary result, what do you see as being supportive of particularly the courts and the criminal justice system in those communities?
Well, it turns out when people, so far, I mean, the answer is yes, that's a problem, obviously. And it isn't just rural. And both in terms of the lack of revenue, although they have probably more other sources of money. If you're a big city, it doesn't be as large a part, but it's there. And so you find and fees, for example, I was talking about the juvenile and the fines and fees there. And in California, they've had a strategy of lawyers to push back, and they're getting rid of that. In state legislation and before that, county by county in California. It's not going to be as easy otherwise. I mean, you know, California's gotten bluer and bluer, I understand that. But it's something to be ashamed about. And there certainly are places where it's possible to shame them. Now, in those counties in Missouri, George, that I was talking about, you know, that's tough. You got to beat them some other way. And the main way that you get them is you don't go to the county people, you go to the state. And still you haven't got it because the rural people are in the state legislature. I got that. But you're more likely to, if you lift it up there, at least there are people from the city and the suburbs who think that's absolutely terrible. So there are various ways to go at it, is my point. But that's absolutely true. In some places, as I said, when people hear about it, they think it's awful. So, okay, are we? I can stay all day. You might. I got one more here, and then I just have to get there in time for the basketball game tonight. It's spring break.
Hi, I'm Fred Pollock. I'm from San Francisco. So I have a question for you on affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a lot of our poverty concentration issues are around the affordability of housing. It's now a national issue.
Yes.
Is the redlining policies and what's come out of redlining policies around zoning, do you see that as a related issue?
Yes, because this has a major racial aspect. So I don't know whether you know, and if you don't, you should know Matthew Desmond's book, Evicted. It's a wonderful Pulitzer Prize winning thing. And he shows us in Milwaukee, and it's typical city after city, it's segregated. And the people who were hit in Milwaukee, and going back to the other question about how about the big cities, in Milwaukee, he studied it very carefully, and it comes down, and you know, the answer, if you want money, why don't you go after the people who have the money and not with the people who don't have the people? You know, it's not just about money, it's got the race in there. And so Milwaukee is a very segregated city, and the way the police police the city is they come after people of color. So absolutely it's connected. Now you said affordable is sort of two things, but they do connect to each other. Because the question of affordable housing, as we all know, is terrible for white people too. It's awful, national problem, it's very expensive to fix it. We got ourselves in a terrible hole there. But when you look at, it's again a segregation thing, Richard Rothstein, you know his book, The Color of Law, another fantastic book. I thought I knew a lot about housing, but you really got to read that. And the point is that when you segregate, it creates a sub-market because it's segregated. And so it gets to be actually more sort of per capita, more expensive to live in the African-American neighborhood than it is in the rest of the city and county. So they're really connected to each other. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for you all.
Peter, thank you very much. If you'll just hold in place, don't clear quite yet. We have a couple of things to mention. One sweet note. Will the person who's celebrating her birthday on Friday hold up her hand and we will sing to Nancy? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nancy. Happy birthday to
you. Sing happy birthday to Carol, who has a birthday tomorrow.
All right, let's do it.
Happy
birthday
to
you.
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday, dear Carol. Happy birthday to you. Next month, again, from the strong bench of Temple Micah, Carla Peterson Rosenblum will speak from this title, Black Gotham, A Family History of 19th Century African Americans in New York City. Mark that date, it's April 12th. We have no extra bread. We recycle. You'll find places to take your thing. Let me give the microphone to the lady.
First of all, thank you so much. Thank you. The next topic is much more mundane, about clearing and garbage. There is a very large garbage can sitting in the middle of the back hall. Please come out slowly. Do scrape your plate and enter in from whichever door. Leave your plate, your scraped plate, on the edge of the center island. Put your silverware in the red container and then leave. Thank you so much. Thank you.